If you're a single mother, life must be tough, right? Perhaps you're unemployed and targeting our wealth? At a high-end restaurant, the meeting with my son's fiancée's family began. Their mother, hearing about my situation as a single mother, scoffed at me. Well, anyway, you don't seem to be in a decent profession. This marriage is not acceptable. While raging inside, I just smiled with my lips. Just appearances. Just superficial. She was unaware of who my son and I really were, only able to see things so superficially. My name is Irene. For reasons of my own, I've raised my son, Sean, by myself. It's been hard, but from kindergarten through college graduation, Sean managed to grow up splendidly. The first time he took me out for dinner with his first paycheck, a flood of emotions overwhelmed me, and I ended up crying in front of him. How embarrassing. Now Sean has turned 25. One day, I received a message from him saying, I need to talk about something. The message was so simple that I couldn't guess what it was about. When I replied asking what it was, he just insisted, I'll talk later. Worried that something might have happened, I was anxious all day. I left work early and waited at home, and when Sean came home, he seemed a bit embarrassed. Sitting around the living room table, we talked as if we were a family reuniting after a long time, asking each other, are you keeping well? Or, how's work? So, what's up today? What did you want to discuss? I made a second cup of tea and finally got around to the main topic. Thanks. Sean had seemed cheerful since he got home. It wasn't a negative topic, but he appeared tense. After thanking me for the tea, he took a deep breath. Eventually, as if he had made up his mind, he nodded, saying, yeah, and began to speak. Mom, actually, I'm thinking of getting married. Getting married? Come on, you don't need to be so surprised. The sudden mention of a marriage genuinely shocked me. But, right. Sean is already 25. It's not strange at all that he would be having such discussions at his age. As time goes by, it seems to pass terrifyingly quickly. It feels like just a moment ago, my son was still a child, and now here he is talking about marriage. I see. If you have thoughtfully chosen your partner, I won't oppose it. Congratulations, Sean. Yeah, thanks, Mom. After that, nothing particularly special happened, and life went on as usual. But inside, I felt his joy as if it were my own celebration, and my mind was in a festive. Sean mentioned he has to get up early tomorrow, so he went to bed after dinner and a shower. I am still awake, upstairs in my room looking at my computer screen. Then, on a whim, I quietly went downstairs. My destination was a photograph that had been in our house for over 20 years. Hey, honey. Sean is getting married. Can you believe it? The face of my late husband, John, in the photograph, has always remained smiling. When I'm happy, he seems to share my joy, and when I'm struggling, he seems to encourage me. Such a gentle smile. Looking at you now, Sean really resembles you. I overlaid the images of my late husband and my son. Oh, that's right. I was 25 when I got married too. Realizing the coincidental matching of numbers, I started reminiscing about how I first met my husband. I grew up in a residential area in New York. Our house was ordinary, but there were others with large yards scattered around. The neighborhood wasn't very active socially. We would greet each other when we met, but there wasn't much chatting or becoming friends. Thinking back, it feels like it was a bit of an unusual area. In that setting, there was just one person I intentionally met up with. Jack. Let's go to the park. Coming home from kindergarten, I would always ring the doorbell at the Thompsons. I was calling for my friend living next door, a year younger than me, John Thompson. I'm coming. Relieved by the voice over the intercom, I adjusted my bag filled with sandpit toys. Soon, the front door would open, and he and his mother would come out through the large gate. Back then, since we were only 5 and 4 years old, a guardian had to accompany us when we went out to play. All right, let's get going. Wait for me, Rennie. As I started walking ahead, he would chase after me with a little run. Rennie, Rennie, he would always call and follow me around, and I adored him. Even as we became elementary and middle school students, our relationship didn't change. We ended up at different high schools, but since our houses were next door to each other, I never really felt lonely. Plus, by that time, we had phones, so on days we couldn't meet in person, we could still chat or call each other. That's how we grew up, maintaining the relationship we had since kindergarten. Eventually, when I turned 25, I received a heartfelt proposal from a Jack. Ah, I've finally been caught. I thought somewhat defiantly, but I accepted amidst the blessings of those around us. John and I happily elevated our childhood friendship to marriage. We were enjoying a blissful married life, but disaster struck unexpectedly. All relatives were dressed in full black mourning attire. My 2-year-old son was innocently sitting on my lap. These 3 scenes have never left my mind even after all those years. At the time, we had been married for only 3 years, and parenting was still quite challenging. Yet, it was undoubtedly the peak of our happiness. Despite that, my husband, John, was involved in a major traffic accident that made the news and newspapers, and he never returned. The younger Jack, who had always been chasing after me, had suddenly passed me by and left me behind. Overwhelmed by grief, I spent my days in a void. I enrolled Sean in daycare and returned to work. But still, I couldn't really focus on anything. No matter what I thought about, I would soon find myself zoning out, unable to concentrate. It was my 2-year-old son Sean who comforted me and brought me back to reality, saying, "Mom, I'll give you a hug." Sean. "Mom, do you have a fever?" The face of my son asking this looked very sad. There were no tears, but his face was marked with worry and uncertainty. "No, I'm fine," I said, smiling at him. Seeing that, Sean returned to his usual broad smile. Ah, right. It was me who made Sean look sad. Because I kept feeling down and couldn't recover, stumbling through my days, Sean sensed it and shared my sadness. "Sorry, Sean." Realizing this, I decided to move forward with a smile. After finishing the household chores for the day, I knelt in front of John's photograph. No longer would he come chasing after me calling, "Rennie, Rennie." He had crossed the finish line alone, leaving me behind, and now it was my turn to chase after him. Jack. While I gazed at the photo, Sean began playing with various shaped wooden blocks behind me. "Rest easy and watch over us." Wow. A clattering noise came from behind. It must have been his blocks tumbling down. Yet, Sean didn't get discouraged and started stacking the blocks again. Impressed by his resilience, I continued talking to the smiling photo of my husband. "It's okay. I'll take good care of Sean." It's not that I had forgotten the sorrow. The despair of losing him was definitely lurking within me. But I resolved to convert that pain into strength and raise our only son to be a fine man. That was my promise to my beloved husband. As Sean grew, he increasingly resembled his father. His eager mom, as he chased after me was just like a Jack. When he reached middle school, Sean began to be rebellious. We had our disagreements, but I believe our relationship as mother and son was never truly strained. After navigating his teenage years, Sean became a kind, sincere man. And now, he was talking about getting married. Hearing this news, I felt a mix of happiness, loneliness, and a little bit of surprise. His fiancée was named Sophie. He had met her right after starting college and they had been dating ever since. I had seen a picture of her once, she seemed very gentle and demure. "We're here." I shifted the car into park and engaged the handbrake as I informed my son of our arrival. "Thank you. I appreciate you coming all this way and even driving." Before the wedding, a meeting with Sophie and her parents was arranged. The address on the invitation led to a famous upscale restaurant. It is located a bit away from the heart of New York, tucked away in a quieter area. We got quite lost, but Sean helped navigate using his phone's GPS, and we managed to arrive without much trouble. We had allowed plenty of time, so there was no issue. While glancing at the beautifully manicured garden, I opened the front door. As the door moves, a bell chimes. Hearing the two tones, a staff member appeared from inside. "Welcome." "Hello, my name is Sean. We have a reservation for a meal with Sophie." "Sean, we've been expecting you." "I will guide you now." Following the staff member's lead, we proceeded. "This is your room." We moved from the entrance down a corridor to a room on the right at the end. After expressing our thanks several times, we turned towards the door. It's finally happening. Yes. Sean whispered that and then announced politely, "Excuse me, this is Sean," as he opened the door. A small yes came in response, and then he slowly opened the door. Finally, I was about to meet my son's fiancée. Just the thought made me even more nervous. We exchanged formal greetings, and Sean and I took our seats across from them as prompted. Her father was absent due to work and would be arriving later. Suddenly, I felt a piercing gaze. "Excuse me, is there something wrong?" The person looking at me was Sophie's mother, Catherine. Her manner wasn't just observant as the two of us entered, it was more like scrutinizing in an unpleasant way. "No, it's nothing at all," she said, but I get the harsh impression from her. Slender and wearing glasses, she struck me as a stereotypically serious person, no offense intended. After Sean and I finished a simple introduction of our names and relation, it was Sophie's turn to speak. Right after I finished greeting, I saw Catherine nudge Sophie with her elbow to signal her to speak. Why she needed to signal her that way instead of just saying, "Please go ahead." "Hello, my name is Sophie. Thank you so much for coming on such short notice today. Sean and I have been dating since our college days." She gave a very serious self-introduction that sounded almost like she was reading from a script, covering everything from how they met to their backgrounds. "Please let us have your blessing today," she concluded, then smiled briefly at Sean. I could understand how awkward it must feel for two people who are usually so close to suddenly behave so formally. "Next, it's my turn," Catherine said, adjusting her glasses with her fingers before she began speaking. But what followed was less a greeting and more an unbearable bragging session. Including her absent husband, her family members are all elite civil servants. They work in departments like the Treasury and the State Department, holding significant positions within the core of the U.S. government. Contrary to her serious demeanor, she was smiling proudly as she spoke. "Is that so? I'm impressed. Well, that alone is not much of an issue. I am aware that many people have great confidence in their own credentials. However, what truly upset me was how Catherine looked down on her own daughter, Sophie, saying, despite all this, Sophie is not really working in the Library of Congress. Sophie is just looking down. Both my older sons are elites, yet Sophie talks about following her dreams. Sophie chose not to pursue a career as a generalist, instead defying her mother's pressure to follow her own dreams. She's doing a respectable job, a truly wonderful young lady, isn't she?" When I praised her thus, Catherine laughed. It was a snide laugh of detached nobility. After her bout of laughter, she looked straight at me and continued. "Well, you come from a single mother household, after all." "Excuse me?" I asked, confused by her statement and the connection she was trying to make. Still smirking, Catherine went on. "Single mother household, so probably just a high school graduate? From such a perspective, even a dull daughter like mine might seem impressive." She burst out laughing again. "Single mother households must struggle, right? Perhaps you're unemployed and targeting our wealth? Well, either way. It doesn't seem like you'd be in any decent job," she surmised. I didn't mention my job in my introduction earlier. I intentionally left it out, hoping it would come up in conversation later and make for a more interesting discussion. I regretted that decision now, not anticipating this kind of attack. Such a marriage, no matter if Sophie is a dull girl, cannot be approved. "Please, we must ask you to leave," she concluded dismissively. "Excuse me. This dinner was crucial for Sean's marriage. I couldn't let things be ruined, so I just nodded along and let any snide remarks or boasts pass. However, I couldn't ignore what had just been said. I had sworn to my late husband to raise Sean as a single mother. Catherine had looked down on that fact, our being a single mother household. That was something I could not forgive. Sean is currently serving as a congressman. I thought you, being a civil servant, would know, calling him unemployed is quite an insult." I managed to keep my anger in check, barely containing the boiling rage as I forcefully refuted the disrespectful label of the unemployed. Matching Catherine, who had smirked while making her derogatory remarks, I too crafted a smile with just my lips. Well, I couldn't actually find it funny on an emotional level at all. How can you call such a wonderful young woman dull and speak so lowly of your own child? Children are not tools to satisfy a parent's vanity. What? Catherine appeared baffled as I suddenly started to speak eloquently. Aren't you an elite civil servant as well, Catherine? Too busy, perhaps, leaving your daughter's upbringing to a nanny or someone else. Which might explain why she turned out so wonderfully. That, at least, was a wise decision. What? What is this rudeness all of a sudden? Rude? Who are you saying is being rude? Don't you remember what you just said? Mom, please calm down. Sean interjected. If you had raised her with those values, she wouldn't have turned out to be the remarkable woman she is today. Despite trying to control myself, my anger was gradually surfacing. As I continued to speak rapidly, Catherine's face turned red, and she started squawking in outrage. But I ignored it and continued further. We may be a single-mother household, but I am a university professor, so we are financially stable. My son, who is as talented as his father, took over his grandfather's political base and became a congressman. I'm sorry to shatter your foolish and shallow misconceptions with reality. We are not struggling financially at all, so we do not need a single penny of your wealth. As I kept talking nonstop, Catherine seemed at a loss for words. She just opened and closed her mouth, muttering, "Oh. You said this match cannot be approved, but I, for one, would very much like to celebrate their marriage. To save a lovely young woman from this nightmare." In the end, I said almost everything I wanted. I calmed down a bit when Sean intervened again, and I began to feel a sense of guilt towards him and Sophie. Congressman? University professor. Catherine, completely taken aback, was just muttering those two words under her breath. Her dazed state, so unexpected from the first impression, and her face with eyes and mouth wide open were somewhat amusing. I studied political science in college. The more I learned, the more I was drawn into its depths. What system the current world operates on? Who proposed that system, where, and what kind of changes has it undergone? Learning about it turned even the world history I found boring in middle and high school into an exciting treasure box. My research was so engaging that I continuously produced results. As a result of continuing to write them down and publish them in the form of papers. Before long I had risen to the rank of professor at a well-known private university. While teaching several courses, I continued my research. Of course, being a single mother was challenging. I would start my research and writing after putting Sean to bed. I had to review students' papers. Depending on the time of year, grading tests might also be part of the responsibilities. Additionally, there were instances where tasks unrelated to personal research, such as university administrative work, had to be undertaken. There were times when I had to pull all-nighters, sipping black coffee to keep my eyelids from closing. As I tackled the university administration work unrelated to my research. The reason I managed to balance parenting and being a professor was thanks to the help from my parents and my husband's parents. Meanwhile, my husband's father had been a congressman, even serving as a secretary. After graduating, my husband worked as his father's secretary but died in that tragic accident. Over 20 years later, having graduated from a prestigious law school, Sean started working as his grandfather's secretary. And just recently, with Sean turning 25, my father-in-law retired from his position. Sean then took over his political base, ran for office, and was successfully elected, becoming a congressman. Sorry to keep you waiting, I am Michael, Sophie's father. In the midst of the tense atmosphere, Sophie's father, Michael, arrived. As all eyes turned towards him, our gazes met. Wait, have I met this man before? Are you Irene? Ah. He seemed to recognize me too. After a few seconds of jogging my memory, it clicked. Michael, as in that Michael. He was a great friend of my husband during our college days. I vividly remembered going out for drinks with him and my husband. The last time we met was at a funeral over 20 years ago. His appearance had changed so much that I hadn't recognized him. When I heard that Sophie was going to marry someone with the Thompson surname, I was surprised. But I never imagined it would actually be John's family. You know each other? Catherine interjected, clearly flustered by our unexpected reunion. Yes. They're the wife and son of my late best friend. Sean has grown up well. Although Sean might not remember, he had met Michael when he was about 2 years old at his father's funeral. Nice to meet you, what a surprising connection. Indeed, it's quite moving to think my daughter is going to marry the son of a dear friend who has passed away. Indeed. However, seizing the opportunity, I turned towards Catherine with a smile. It seems your wife doesn't quite agree. What? Catherine, what is this about? Michael questioned her. Well, that is... Michael pressed her for answers. Catherine was visibly panicked and struggled to respond. I helped by repeating her words from memory. She tried to prevent it by raising her voice, but it had the opposite effect. This ended up proving my words to be true. Seeing a tearful and visibly upset Catherine, Sophie seemed to smile, somewhat pleased. Irene, Sean, I am truly sorry for what has happened. Please, let's not call off the engagement. Michael apologized to us. No, stop that, Michael. It's not something you should apologize for, and we have no intention of calling it off. After persuading him to stop apologizing, everyone finally settled down at our seats. Just then, the first course of the meal was served. Despite the awkward atmosphere, we proceeded with the meal. It goes without saying that, despite being a course at a high-end restaurant, I couldn't appreciate the taste. That night, Sean told me more about Sophie's family background. As Catherine had said, aside from Sophie, everyone else in her family worked as elite civil servants. Working at the National Library was indeed respectable, but her mother saw her as a dropout. I honestly can't stand to see Sophie, who has followed her own dreams, treated in such a way. Sophie has an older brother and a younger brother, both of whom are also elite civil servants. Their mother boasts of their accomplishments as her own and is overly intrusive. Perhaps tired of such interference, her older brother, who works at the foreign ministry, moved out and now moves around frequently. To compensate, it seems Catherine became excessively involved in Sophie's life. Being unacknowledged by her parents and treated as a bother, that's just not right. Indeed. When I told Sophie how you single-handedly raised me as a single mother, she was so envious she cried. Sean. I straightened up and sipped my cold tea, as Sean continued. Kind of feels out of the blue, but managing your work as a professor while raising me alone, I really think it was tough. Mom, thank you again. Sean, stop it. His words nearly brought me to tears. To hide them, I laughed awkwardly. Although I probably couldn't hide the redness in my eyes at all. Ah, silly Sean. What do you mean of silly? Just kidding. This time, I laughed genuinely, looking directly into my son's eyes. What? He seemed to ask with his gaze. I summed up all my feelings in one phrase. You're welcome. Later, I received a formal apology from Michael over the phone. Despite me insisting it was all right. And about Catherine, he began. After that night, it seems their family had some serious discussions. It seems that she has long been interfering with the friendships of children, including Sophie, offering various unsolicited opinions. It's said that she would make arbitrary judgments based on her own whims, telling them to associate with this friend or to cut ties with that friend. She has been repeatedly told, stop forcing your ideals onto the children, but it seems nothing has changed. Her older and younger sons had succumbed to her pressure, reluctantly following the paths she approved. But Sophie was different. Despite the derogatory comments and pressure, she chose her own path. Michael was quite surprised that Sophie, who seemed the most timid of the three, was the one who stood up to her mother. Ultimately, Catherine's values never changed. I've told her many times to reconsider her thoughts. Michael's voice lowered as he continued. I'm getting old, and it was with great hesitation, but I've decided to divorce Catherine. Is that so? Of course, she won't be invited to Sophie and Sean's wedding. I won't let her cause any trouble for them, so rest assured. What will happen to Catherine in the future is uncertain. With her strong pride at over 50 years old, a remarriage seems unlikely. She remains an elite civil servant, so financially she should be fine. But her profound loneliness is easy to imagine. No matter how well educated or successful on the elite path, those who look down on others will eventually find themselves looked down upon. A good job title doesn't necessarily mean a good person. At this age, with an adult son, I've come to realize this anew. Sean and Sophie. Their wedding was quite large due to Sean's job. Many gathered, all blessing my son. As a mother, it was an incredibly joyful scene. Today, I allowed myself to cry openly. "Mom, you're crying again." Before I knew it, Sean was in front of me, teasingly remarking on my tears. Wiping my eyes repeatedly with a tissue, I managed to respond. "It can't be helped. You'll understand, give it another 20 or 30 years. Seeing the child you've raised with care find someone special and leave your side is a feeling that can't be understood without experiencing it. It's as much a source of loneliness as it is of joy." After all the events, I returned home alone. Sean's room was nearly empty now. Tears threatened again, but I stifled them, half expecting to be teased. "You're crying again, Jack." As the town quieted down with the night, so did my heart. As usual, I spoke to his photograph. Sean's wedding was truly wonderful. "It would have been great if you could have been there too." Of course, there was no answer. Sean was really taken with that girl who looked so sad at the introduction meeting. Adding to the story Sophie had shared during their introduction. Sean had told me more. Despite the pressure and her mother's influence, Sophie suffered. Concerned, Sean kept reaching out to her daily. Eventually, she opened up to him and began to share her feelings. "He's persistent, isn't he? I wonder who he gets that from." Rennie, remembering the boy who had followed me forever. After talking so much, I put the sweets I received as a memento beside him. "Do you remember what I told you? When I was devastated by his death, 2-year-old Sean had encouraged me to keep going. I had made a unilateral promise then to take good care of Sean. Had I managed to keep that promise?" Hoping for an answer, I displayed a photo of Sean from today on my phone, aiming it at John's photograph. "How about this?" Adjusting the phone. I glanced at Sean's photo again and couldn't help but laugh. "Aren't the two of you just too much alike?" I had always thought they were similar. Although I knew it, their smiling faces were so alike they could almost be the same person. Even as his wife and mother, I might mistake one for the other. Finding that amusing, I laughed to myself again. Mixed with my laughter, I thought I heard, "Thank you, Rennie." It was probably just my imagination, but the smiling photo looked as if it could have said just that.